Hello everyone, this is the Spider Fanboy here to bring you part 3 to What If Ichigo Began His Training Early. So, last time we left off, everyone was getting ready to head out to Soul Society just in case they needed to. So, why don't we go on ahead and check in with our group in Soul Society, which currently consists of Ishin representing himself, Yoroichi, and I have Hiyori? I believe that's her name. Hiyori. Let me see. Yeah, Hiyori Sarugaki, the little blonde girl who liked messing around, who liked messing with Ichigo. So Yoroichi and Hiyori are representing, Kisuke and the Vizards, and Rukia is going with them to help represent all of them. The four of them are traveling to Soul Society, being escorted by Renji and Byakuya, so that they can explain the situation and what exactly happened. Um, due to the time anomaly, obviously things are going to be happening much quicker. With how time passes through the Dangai and how this changes, like how time flows between the realms of like Soul Society and the living world. They actually have some time to set things up, but because of this, so does Aizen. So currently they're kind of being detained, but not really. They're kind of more on house arrest. They're under suspicion, but Hiyori has provided the data of what exactly happened, or at least she would have if it wasn't for the fact that Aizen ends up pulling his framing stunt early. He writes that whole letter for Momo to use, and he ends up having to do it a little quicker, but because of how time flows and the fact that he's always monitoring the situation, when he notices that Hiyori ends up joining, that Hiyori and Yoruichi are the ones joining Ishin and Rukia, he initially only suspected Ishin and Rukia, but when he saw that Hiyori and Yoruichi were joining as well, he quickly, wrote that letter from Momo and faked his death. And right now they're being detained, but since they came in with the information, Yamamoto is kind of stalling Central 46 from having them all executed. It doesn't help that they end up deciding that they need to get into contact with Kisuke to send in the group just in case Aizen ends up escalating the situation to get them executed. So Hiyori and Yoruichi make the admittedly ballsy and potentially dangerous and risky decision to actually escape capture. And they hide out. Maybe they hide out with the Shibas, but since Ishin is here, they may be under suspicion. So maybe instead they hide out in the underground hideout training area that Ichigo did his Bankai training in. That's where Hiyori and Yoruichi are currently going to be for now, while Ishin and Rukia are the ones being detained and questioned. Ishin is able to convince some of the captains to actually hear him out. Specifically, he's able to convince Byakuya because he himself is a noble. Even though Byakuya is kind of looking down on him because of the fact that he left Soul Society, but he is willing to lend his ear, even if he's not exactly sure what he's going to do with the information himself. Um, Ukata or not Ukatake, Jushiro, Rukia's captain, and Kyoraku. I think that's his name. Uh, the guy with the hat who ends up replacing Yamamoto as the head captain. Uh, those two also listen in. They're willing to hear them out. Soifan was willing to hear out, but then Yoroichi left, so she's kind of in a bit of a mess. She's not in the best headspace. She would have been willing to listen from the get go, but Yoroichi ended up, escaping again. So she's just a mess right now. Not really too reliable. Um, Mayori is very much does not want to listen to anything Hiyori would have wanted to tell her, even if it was some interesting information. He does not want Kisuke back. So he's a bit of a middle ground, but he's also extremely unpredictable, so they're not sure they can trust him. They don't trust Gin. They're not. They don't. They're not sure about Kaname or the. I don't even know the dog captain. Kenpachi is Kenpachi, and yeah. So right now they only really have Byakuya and Toshiro as well. Byakuya, Toshiro, Jushiro, and Kyoraku. They're the ones who are really going to be listening and kind of on their side, talking to Yamamoto and trying to convince him to hold off and stave on the execution. Um, and they end up sending the message. Maybe Yoruichi has some kind of communication device to send the message to Kisuke, or maybe she's able to get back to the living world. I wouldn't be surprised. It's Yoruichi. She's able to get back. They have the and while this is all happening, Ichigo and all of his friends and his sisters go to that firework festival on the first, and they all spend some time with each other. And for the final week, before they end up getting the message due to the difference in time, um, for that final week, they all spend some their time with each other. They may some do some leisurely training just to refine what new abilities they develop, specifically more on Ichigo's part and Uryu with his let stilts that he's developed. But basically they're all like relaxing and they're relaxing, but they're also cautious. They're cautiously optimistic for the future. But eventually they get the news. Aizen faked his death a lot earlier than anyone would have expected in order to get Soul Society and Central 46 to suspect all the people who came back of treason and conspiracy. So they travel through the Dongai. There's no issue with the cleaner. They're everyone literally is able to use their bringer light, and specifically like with Orihime and Tatsuki, they've learned some level of Shunpo. Tatsuki's better, but if anything, Orihime can just use bringer light and like her little platform to like help boost her own speed. Chad's learned some level of the Sonito. He's not the best at it, but he can use it, and he can use it with his bringer light as well. Ichigo and Uryu are the fastest there, outside from Yoruichi, and they all come out. They end up out. They arrive in Soul Society, and Ichigo has his fight against Jidamba, where he just much more passively takes him down. He's not as gung ho about it. He's not as like basically he just takes him down like quickly. He just knocks him out or knocks him on his ass basically. Destroys his weapon. Orihime heals it and him, and he opens the gate. And when Gin shows up, Ichigo is actually able to hold him off. There's none of that him getting blasted all the way back. He's able to stand his ground, but he realizes this isn't the best way to storm into Soul Society and immediately pick a fight with the captain. So he ends up retreating. Maybe Yoruichi comes by. They end up retreating and meet up with the Shiba clan. Ichigo has a bit of a moment with his family here and explains that Ishin and Ishin and Ruki are currently being held. Ganshu is kind of split on whether or not he wants to help because at this point he doesn't like Rukia. He still doesn't like Rukia, but I am forgetting Kukaku. Kukaku is able to beat it into his head that they need to help their family and that there isn't anything really wrong with what went down with Rukia and uh, Kaien. That like it wasn't her fault. And Ichigo gets a bit more of an explanation. Maybe he had a talk with Rukia, him and Ishin. I mentioned it before. Rukia ended up telling Ishin when they ended up meeting, and he explained things. But now he gets a little bit more of the story from these two. Maybe like their side of like what ended up happening, the aftermath that Rukia was a bit more hesitant to get into. Um, they end up they're able to do that like little training on controlling their spiritual energy, which goes pretty easy. If anything, Ichigo is able to get it down just as quickly as the others due to the fact that he's actually more trained in it. And they get shot into the Serite. This is their way of breaching so that they're trying to get there as quickly as possible. They're trying to bypass any potential fodder or captains that may try to get in their way. So they're trying to shoot themselves directly into the heart of Serite, cause some cause some chaos, some distractions. They're going to be splitting up when they enter the Cerate so that they can cause some distractions. Ichigo is specifically going to go straight for Rukia and his father so that he can free them and get them to the hideout. Whilst Yoruichi is going to try to sneak the information that Hiyori was trying to get to Yamamoto. She's going to try and sneak it directly to him, or at least to someone that they know that they can trust. So instead of being split up by accident, they actually land directly in the middle of the Serite and they split up on purpose in their similar groups. Maybe it's Tatsuki and Orihime instead, and then it's Chad and Uryu who group up, whilst Ichigo is going to be going on his own, and as is Yoruichi. So the groups that are going to be split up are Tatsuki and Orihime, because they're the ones who mesh the most well together. Or Chad is actually going to go on his own, similar to in canon. He's able to handle himself. He's practically damn near lieutenant level. Like he's basically Renji level, but much more skilled. He has more skills and diverse abilities. And Uryu is also going to be actually traveling on his own. He himself is also practically near captain level in terms of like his spiritual energy. He's probably as powerful as Ichigo was in canon when he had his Shikai, but more skilled. His fighting style is obviously different, and we get our similar fights. We get our Ichigo versus Ikaku. Oh yeah, Ganchu is here too. Let's say Ganchu sticks with Ichigo. He's kind of insistent ever since Kukaku kind of beat it into his head, and he wants to confront Rukia and get that conversation all on his own. Ganju still gets into the same fight with Yumachika. Ichigo gets into his fight with Ikaku, but he takes him down much more easier. Ikaku actually almost considers using his Bankai against him because of how powerful he is, but he wants this fight to go to his captain, so he lets himself um, fall unconscious. Although Ichigo does still help him with the ointment stuff. And Uryu has his fight with Jirobo, which goes it's an easy breeze, like not even a competition. Ichigo the next day ends up having his fight with Renji. He has to slow himself down so that Ganju can keep up, but typically he'll just pick him up by like the collar of his clothing and drag him along. But Ichigo does still get into his fight with Renji, and Ichigo is so much easier. There's little to no issue in their battle. He's able to take him down pretty easily, and Ichigo isn't left nearly as injured. He's able to use his iron skin and his blood vein to protect himself, his hero and his blood vein. So he has little to no wounds, but he does still meet up with Hanataro. Maybe Ganju found him, like in the area. Maybe Ganju accidentally got injured trying to butt into the fight, trying to help his family. Uh, Ichigo somewhat appreciates it, but he also clocks him over the head for being an idiot, getting involved in the fight when he had it handled. And Hanataro is treating Ganju's injuries instead. Uh, Ichigo himself actually heads off on his own. Ganju convinces him like, "Oh yeah, it's obvious I've been holding you back. Go on ahead and go. Get to your dad. Get to Uncle Ishin, and I'll be fine here with this dweeb." So Ichigo heads out on his own much earlier, and there's no thing with his hollow mask. He's more in touch with his abilities. He's not so mystified by it, and he didn't even need it. In canon, this would usually be about when the illusionary assassination, when Aizen pulls his fake, his framing of everyone. But instead, let's say I don't know. Maybe he also had some information, like maybe he in that letter that he wrote to Momo, where he initially framed the first group, he even suspected that they would bring in reinforcements, some Ryoka from the living world. Um, Maybe Ishin was able to get some of his story across about him and his Quincy wife, and like why he ended up staying in the living world. But since he's under suspicion, they're not really giving it all the attention it needed. But now that these Ryoka are here, Momo ends up bringing up the rest of the information that was in the letter, or everyone else realizes, oh, Aizen was right all along. Ishin and his group did bring in Ryoka from the living world. They really are trying to overthrow Soul Society, so it ends up kicking into the high gear similarly to in canon. Ichigo has his battle with Kenpachi, and it is frighteningly intense. Due to his immense power and skill, he's pushing Kenpachi to reveal more and more of his latent power. And he actually ends up pushing Ichigo back, and they actually have to have a similar clash. Ichigo actually unleashes a fully named Getsuga Tensho. It's not full power, but he actually calls out Getsuga Tensho. He unleashes it against Kenpachi, who releases his own wave of Reishi from his blade. And Kenpachi still goes down, but Ichigo is kind of left like on his knees. His wounds are healing due to the fact that he's more in touch with his Hollow Ryatsu. He's more in touch with his with White Zangetsu. They're on. Sorry if that glares bad. Damn it. But then it's over here. Okay, that's probably gonna be the best. But yeah, he's more in touch with both of his Zangetsu spirits, so he is able to get out of the fight in much better state, but more exhausted. A similar level of exhaustion. His body is in a better physical state, but he's just about as exhausted as he was in canon. Yoruichi still pulls his ass out of the fire. He doesn't completely pass out, but not until he actually gets there. He's able to get some information on what their current plan is, and but he still passes out by the time they get to the hideout. Ganjo and Hanataro are still moving forward. Are still moving towards the execution chamber, whatever it was called, where they're holding Rukia and Ishin. And when Chad has his Shunsui Kyoraku, that's his name. When Chad has his battle with him, he doesn't push him into like using his Shikai, releasing his Zanpakuto, because that guy is he's ridiculously powerful. But he does actually have to get into a combat stance. He actually has to guard himself using his unreleased Zanpakuto. Maybe he has to pull up a keto barrier when Chad tries to blitz him with an El Muerte with a I think it's El Muerte or La Muerte when he tries to blitz him with that attack and is able to knock him out or he's able to decommission him from the battle, but he ends up leaving him instead of trying to imprison him. Then we get to Ichigo has to start up his Bankai training. And this is going to go very, very, very well. Well, that's weird. I don't. It's not mentioning whether he has his battle. I was under the impression he had his first battle with. He had like his little confrontation with Byakuya and Jushiro. He should have, right? Yeah. Or I guess. Hmm. I guess Yoruichi would be able to talk out this much more mindful Ichigo out of trying to go straight for the captains again. He's more aware of the situation and of like what the captains are, who they are, what they're capable of. So he's not going to instantly jump to trying to jump into the battle. So I guess he would start up his Bankai training a little earlier in the day. Definitely trying. Yeah. So it says August 5th nighttime. So yeah, he ends up starting his Bankai training just a little earlier. Not by much, but instead of just sparring with Old Man Zangetsu, like I said, he learned how to in his training with Ukitake to really get a handle on a Shikai. He pulled Shikai straight out of the gate practically. He talked to both Old Man Zangetsu and White Zangetsu, who briefly explained what they were, the representation of his Quincy, Shinigami, and Hollow powers. And here he actually trains with both of them instead of just the one. Maybe like for the first day and a half, it's Old Man Zangetsu. Um, probably giving him like just a few lectures on like how he could better use his Quincy abilities, how he should like actually pull out his morphing his blade into the bow that I mentioned, and how he's gonna have to really pull out every stop against these captains. Um, just in case, if he really wants to protect the people he loves, he's gonna have to be willing to pull out every stop, no matter the situation. And when it comes to battling against his hollow self, he trains him purely in Bankai. He forces him to call out Tensu Zangetsu, and they actually spar in Bankai with against one another. Particularly whenever he's resting. If he's not training, if he's like resting, whenever he goes in the hot springs, he's actually meditating and training in his inner world as well. So it's constant back and forth training between with Old Man and White Zangetsu, and he's getting extremely powerful. He's developing his more hollow based abilities. He learns how to use the Seto. He learns how to use the Seto properly. He can channel it through his blade or just through his fingertips. He learns how to get a better grasp on his Bankai than he did in canon. It's not like how did Hollow Zangetsu, how did he describe it when he took over Ichigo's body in the fight against Byakuya? He said, "Oh, your bones are creaking and cracking under the pressure and strain of your own spiritual pressure. This is how you use Bankai." Yeah, he's not gonna have that problem. He's much more accustomed to his Hollow Reishi and is using his power all together at once. Sorry, almost had a sneeze there. But yeah, he's much more in touch with his ability, so there's very little strain whatsoever. And he lets him know that if he does need to, he can call upon him and he'll help him in battle by taking over his body. But if he really is that weak, he may just take it from him personally, permanently. And he leaves that hanging. He's like, it's a bit of a joke, but it's also a bit serious. Like, if you really want to get stronger, you need to get a better handle of your powers. Don't make it necessary to the point that I have to take control. And Ichigo kind of lets that stick with him. He's like, yeah, I get what you're trying to say. Don't worry. I'll make sure that I'm prepared. Uh, then we have our Uryu versus Mayuri, which goes much better. He's not going to be like as injured. I don't even think he would need to pull out the final usage of his lead stilts. Like I said, he ended up moving on to that second bow that he had after the lead stilts, the weird cross shape that he had after Soul Society. He was able to move on to that bow much earlier. So he was much stronger before using the lead stilts, and he has more access to more abilities. So he's able to pull out, let's say that blood vein barrier. He's able to briefly pull that out to help protect himself from Mayori's blade and any weapons he may try using. He's able to he's basically able to fire off a similar level um, arrow. He's able to fire off a similar level like Reishi arrow that's at a similar level to what he did in canon when he released the full power of his lead stilts. But and while it doesn't take him out of the battle, it does drain him. And he's wary that he may actually have to use the lead stilt's full capabilities sometime in the future if this is how powerful captains are. And it doesn't do as drastic damage. He's not gonna have the same giant hole, but it does still split his Bankai, and it does still leave him with like, let's say, like a gaping chest wound. It's not like the point where like he should have just completely toppled over and split in half, but he is still left with like a gaping hole in his side that he has to retreat and heal. Then we have Toshiro versus Gin. This could have happened a bit earlier, especially since Toshiro is really on the side of the Ryoka since it's Ishin and apparently his own son so that are here and that they're trying to fight against. So maybe he could have had his confrontation with Gin a little earlier, but maybe Ishin gave him like a bit of a talking to. He's the captain now. He always trusted he would be captain one day, and now that he is the captain, he needs to keep a cooler head. So maybe this does still happen around the same time as in canon, the same night. Um, Next day, the day of the execution, earlier, it's it's still early morning. Kenpachi, still comes to the decision. I'm gonna help out Ichigo, so he has this fight with Komamura and Tosin, which goes a little easier. Like I said, he's unleashed more of his power thanks to his battle against Ichigo. He's much more deadly, and he's able to brush them off with little to no difficulty, like with even more ease than he did in canon. It says that Ikaku has a battle against Tetsuzaimon. I do not know who Tetsuzaimon is. Let me see. Tetsuzaimon Iwa. Oh, that guy with the glasses. Huh. Oh, he was around. Okay, he was a former member of the 11th Division. He's a highly competent swordsman. Okay, well, I don't know. Their battle goes just about the same. I don't really know enough about it to really care. Same with Yumichika against Shuhei Hisagi. Um, didn't really care too much about him. Maybe Ikaku. I don't know if he'd pull out Banka. Like I said, Ichigo kind of tempted his hand earlier, but he wanted that fight to go to his captain. But I don't know. Maybe they're able to pull out the win. Maybe they're not. We'll see. They're not really gonna matter later. Renji has his battle with Byakuya. He also went through his Bankai training, and in the day that they had that Renji and Ichigo cross paths, and they actually trained together. And I think this battle doesn't end up happening. I think is actually talked out of the battle because of Ichigo. Maybe he tells him that he needs to be at his full strength for a confrontation later at the execution stance. He blatantly tells him that he wouldn't even be able to Renchi with his Bankai wouldn't even be able to beat him. He definitely wouldn't be able to beat Byakuya. And he proves that. They end up having a spar, and Ichigo is able to take him down pretty quickly. Maybe he uses his own Bankai, maybe he doesn't, but he takes him down and proves to Renji he's like rest and be ready. Ichigo is finishing up. Has now completely finished up his Bankai training, and they move towards the execution. Ichigo interrupts it with Renji there, and Renji actually is the one to solo the lieutenants, while Ichigo goes directly for Byakuya. Yamamoto still has his little confrontation with Kyoraku and Ukitake. Yoruichi has her battle with Soifang, or at least she would if it wasn't for the fact that we're finally going to bring Tatsuki and Orihime into the fold. Tatsuki is actually the one who confronts Soifang as the new pupil to Yoruichi. She jumps into the battle and uses her own ignition, her full bring, to its full potential and faces off against Soifang, who uses her own recreation of the Shunpo, which is imperfect because she's trying to mimic too much of Yoruichi's fighting style. They clash, and Soifang is able to get the edge with her Shikai. She's able to prick her a few times, but she doesn't completely go for the kill, even though she may want to. Just due to the fact that Yoruichi is still watching, and let's say when maybe she's about to go for the kill. Yoruichi considers jumping in, but she sees Orihime step into the battle. She uses her reflection, her counter shield that she's developed, in order to rebound her Zanpakuto, and it actually marks on Soifang's own body. And she steps into the battle. She's not as deadly, but she's able to act as support, throwing in her own attack here and there, and probably even pulling out her blade that I mentioned she developed to maybe, I don't know, to split her Shikai. Like maybe she tries to strike for Orihime, but Orihime, who despite not being a combatant like the rest, has been training her instincts, and she's able to pull out her blade. She's able to manifest it as Soifang is trying to stab into her, and is able to split her Shikai in two, and just barely misses splitting her own hand in half. Because, like I said, so long as Orihime has the intent similar to how her normal attack works, she will split and cut almost anything that is in her way. So it's a definitely a dangerous power, but yeah, they have their battle, and let's say it's Ichigo and Renji versus Byakuya. Gets much more interesting, much more fun. Renji is able to make full use of his Bankai now that he's completely healed from his battle with Ichigo. He's let his wounds rest. He's let his body rest. Um, and he lets the two of them kind of go all out against Byakuya, and they are easily able to pressure him. If Canon Bankai Ichigo was able to pressure Byakuya here, even with him pulling out his own Bankai from the get go and seeing these two pull out theirs, they're able to clash, and it is a titanic clash. maybe Renji sends in his Zabimaru in Bankai. He's trying to like deal with the swarm of petals, and whenever it's about to get too much for his Bankai, Ichigo will step away from trying to actually battle 1-to-1 with Byakuya and will like clear the air of all the petals. But he does eventually get to the point where he moves into that second stage of his Bankai where he has all the swords form. And while Renji is ended up, maybe he gets immediately swarmed and taken out. He tries to release all the pieces of his Bankai to fight against it, but it doesn't last long. He's taken out of the battle, and but he's not completely out of commission. He's just knocked back. Ichigo steps in and pulls out. Like I mentioned, he learned how to do it with Shikai, so now he's able to do it with Bankai. He creates a whole bunch of copies of his Bankai and is able to combat and hold off Byakuya as Renji escapes with Rukia, who has kind of been watching this whole time. Maybe she would have been grabbed, but everyone else is too distracted with their own battles. So, yeah, Renji is able to make away with Rukia. Um, then you have your confrontation between Toshiro and Aizen. And Ichigo is able to finish the battle in a similar way, but he doesn't need to rely on his mask and he's not nearly as heavily injured. He's still standing and maybe he has he's like breathing a little hard, he's huffing and puffing, but he's not out of the battle. He can still go for a long while yet. And he hasn't needed to pull out his trump card. So, he's pretty confident right now. Aizen reveals himself. The message is sent out that Aizen is a traitor. And Ishin just immediately breaks away. He himself has also been watching from the sidelines. He was brought to be executed as well, but he's been watching. He was able to break away pretty easily. He's been watching with Engetsu. He's been waiting for Aizen to make his move, and Aizen eventually does. Um, Sadly, due to the fact that Renji decided to get involved in the fight with Byakuya, despite Ichigo trying to tell him not to, his Bankai has been broken much earlier, so he's not able to reform it in time to try to put up a better fight against Aizen. Aizen still, he stabs Momo and critically injures Toshiro, leaves him on the ground at Central 46. Him, Kaname, who's a little bit more beat up due to the fact that a much more powerful Kenpachi completely handed him his ass on a silver platter, and Gin, they're all able to get away. They arrive at the Sokyoku Hill, I believe that's what it's called, where they have the execution. And Uryu has now arrived himself. He's heard the commotion, and maybe he tried to interfere in the battle against Byakuya, but Ishin held him back. He's telling him to wait and to prepare to use the full power of that bow of his, of that glove, just in case he finally gets here. And Aizen does show up, and Ichigo himself decides to go full power. He's holding his blade, his false senses of Getsu in his right hand, and in his left hand. If you search up Quincy Ichigo, you'll know what I'm talking about. Search up Quincy Ichigo Full Ring or Quincy Ichigo Bleach Brave Souls. He basically looks like he does in his Full Bring Bankai, but he has like his left arm all the way up until here looks different. He has blood vein creeping up his face. Um, and his arm is wrapped in like these weird wrappings that unravel into his bow, into his Quincy bow. So that's what he's gonna have. He's gonna have his left arm for his Quincy bow that just automatically fires reishi arrows without him having to pull the string back. And in his right hand he has Zangetsu or Tensu Zangetsu, and he confronts Aizen, and he makes a much better display. Maybe getting Tosin tried to get in the way, but Ishin steps in to take on Gin, while Uryu takes tries Uryu holds off Tosin from afar to prevent him from using his Bankai on him. By keeping his distance, he's able to prevent Tosin from using his Bankai on him, while Ishin gets in close to try to better keep Gin from exploiting the range of his Zanpakuto. And they're having their own all-out battles. Maybe Chad arrives and helps out with trying. Maybe he tries to land a sneak punch on Aizen, but he's blown away by him. And this sends Ichigo into a rage. He's putting more effort, into trying to cut him down to size. He's trying to kill him. Aizen is able to hold his own, but he definitely has to put up more effort. He's pulling out barriers out of his ass to try to keep all of his attacks at bay. Any of his reishi arrows are blocked with a wide variety of keto spells and barriers that either meet them halfway or cut them off just before they can pierce him. And when Ichigo decides to abandon that, gets in close with his Tensou Zangetsu, he actually has to pull out his own Sanpakuto instead of just pulling out that, stopping it with a finger and then causing all of those injuries to appear on his body. Any injury he does try to land on Ichigo doesn't do as much damage as he would like. He's using his combination of Blood Vein um, and Hero in order to keep himself safe from any crippling injury, and a mask is starting to form over the right side of his face while his blood vein continues to pulse on the left side. He's getting more and more powerful as the fight goes on, and as much as Aizen is loving what he's doing, how far he's progressed, he does end up deciding to take it a bit more seriously. He's able to flare his spiritual pressure, which still is just a little bit too much for Ichigo to handle. He's able to get him to back off. Um, and he had already pulled out the Hogyoku from Rukia. He did it right there when he confronted Rukia and Renji. Instead of bringing Rukia to Sogyoko Hill and doing it in front of everyone, he knew Ishin was waiting for him, so he didn't want to risk Ishin trying to destroy the Hogyoku as he was pulling it out of Rukia's body. So he actually did it right there in front of Renji and left both Renji and Rukia there. Maybe he did bring them, maybe he didn't. I'll say he brought them just to kind of mess with everyone. So their bodies are still on the floor, away from the battle. Um, they end up getting to that point where everyone has finally arrived on Sogyoku Hill, and Ichigo has just been blasted away from Aizen, and this gives the signal to and Kaname to get away from their own battles. They they're wrapping their battles up, Yoruichi and Soifun show up alongside Tatsuki and Orihime. Orihime goes straight to healing everyone's wounds, specifically Rukia and Renji, who she quickly learns is now an ally. And as she's treating everyone's wounds, Tatsuki, Soifang, and Yoruichi all kind of corner Aizen in the same way that Soifang and Yoruichi did in canon, but with the Negation coming in with all those Gillians, they end up having to break away. Ichigo is damn near ready to let himself fully holofy and just completely destroy them, but his body begins to give out on him. All the strain is finally catching up to him. He's finally starting to reach his limit for the first time in a while, and he absolutely hates it. He hates that this is when his body decides to give out on him. Because his battle with Aizen was no joke. Aizen himself probably has an injury or two, nothing that he won't be able to heal. But if he had ended up taking any of them directly, they probably would have been much more fatal. So they end up leaving to Hueco Mundo, and Ichigo and his friends, they end up getting credited with saving Soul Society now that everything's been revealed. They're able to resolve things much quicker. The Vizards are brought to Soul Society. They have a few trials to explain everything. The air is cleared, and some of the Vizards, over the course of the next few weeks or so, basically up until the Arankar decide to show up, the Vizards are going to be oh sorry. The Vizards are going to talk with the Vizards and Kisuke, all of them. They're going to be talking with Soul Society about what it is they're going to be doing. Kisuke and his little group with the Fullbringers, they're still going to be staying there in the living world, as are some of the captains. Um, Tosin, Gin, and Aizen's spots still need to be filled up, so their replacements are the same as in canon. I believe it was like Shinji, Love, and whatever. Basically, they end up filling up the ones who become captains again become captains much earlier, and lieutenants. The ones who join Soul Society again, they do it much earlier. Um, they consider giving Ichigo a Soul Reaper badge, but he reveals that he was given one by Kisuke, how he repurposed Ginjo and they're kind of surprised to know that he knows about Ginjo, and he's like, "Yeah, I know about the whole surveillance stuff. Kisuke modified it so that it could keep track of my stats. It keeps track of my health as I'm in battle, and my spiritual pressure keeps it from harming my body. This is actually I actually only recently developed my Soul Reaper power, so it's gonna help me keep a lid on things until I can properly handle my powers. And I know all about the spying function. It's whatever. If you let me use this, you can go on ahead and add whatever you need to help make yourselves feel safe. Just don't try to put too much of a limiter on my power. I know how that I can't function in my full power all the time in the living world, but don't try to do anything without my knowledge. I want this to be a relationship on trust and stuff. He's much more open. He's much more direct instead of just being blunt and a bit of a just typical teenager behavior. He's a bit more mature about it. He's direct, sure, but he makes things clear how he wants this relationship between them to work, especially if they're going to be facing against Aizen. Um, Ichigo and his friends, they all spend the week in Soul Society recovering. Um, Rukia tells Ichigo and all of them she's going to be staying in Soul Society. She's going to be doing some training and to be ready for when Aizen comes back with his army and whatever it is he plans to do against Soul Society. But she does let them know. She gives them maybe Kisuke was able to give Hinamori since he had to visit to clear his own name. Maybe he was able to give them that communication device similar to the Soul Pager that she had, so they're able to communicate if they ever need to or want to. With like all of her friends in the living world, she's able to communicate with them better, and they all eventually end up returning home. Ishin is offered if he wants to retake his position as Squad 10 captain, but he declines, and he actually has a bit of an idea of setting up a squad in the living world. And right now they're gonna kind of have that on a test run. It's not so much going to be a squad, just that they're going to have their group based in Karakura Town of the remaining Vizards, Ichin and Ichigo, Urahara and his group of the Fullbringers, and Yoroichi Tesai, and those two kids that I don't really care about. Uh, and he even briefly mentions his daughters. But what he does do is that he gets the Shiba clan reestablished as a proper noble clan instead of being, outcasted all the way out into the outskirts. And he brings up the Rukongai. Maybe it's something he and Ichigo bring up because of Ichigo still learns a little bit about Rukia growing up in the Rukongai. Uh, and maybe Ishin talks to Byakuya about it. Because if you really want to lead an example as a noble clan, you should do it for all the people of Soul Society, not just the Shinigami. So, just some reformations, nothing too big. I don't really care for the filler. It really doesn't mean much to me whatsoever. But yeah, they do jump back. They end up going home. Everyone is resting. Ichigo is given an Aosouchi to prepare himself in the case that he may need his true Zanpakuto to face off against Aizen. But instead of having his he's not going to be having his Zanpakuto forged personally. So similarly to how Soul Reapers themselves have to do it, it's going to take some time for his Reishi to settle in. But still, they end up starting the new school year, and over this time, Ichigo has let his spiritual pressure settle into his Aosouchi. He carries it with him whenever he's doing patrols as in his Soul Reaper form. He's still relying on his false Shikai for now. That's what he's going to be using, what he's going to be needing. Should I just straight up open this? Is this... No, that's worse. Sorry. I really hope that's... Sorry. Um, but yeah, they end up starting school. Ichigo has been practicing with his Aosouchi, letting it adjust to his spiritual pressure. He thinks eventually it'll be ready for him to begin his proper Shikai and Bankai training. He does like use it against lower level hollows. He's not actually using his false Shikai as much anymore, but it is what he mainly trains with. Whenever he wants to spar against the others, they really want to test themselves. I completely forgot to mention Uryu used his lead stilts. He tried to land a killing blow against Aizen, but the Negashion completely canceled that out. So similar to Ichigo, he was left with a very strong and bitter taste of defeat. But he's been working on regaining his powers, and he talks with his father a bit about it, and he ends up letting him in on the reason that his grandfather favored the let stilts. Like it's the backstory about around it, and he tells him about the Volstandig. I don't really know enough about the Volstandig to know that whether or not he'd be able to achieve it, but he is made aware of it. But either way, he regains his Quincy powers. He still has that second bow that he uses, but he's much more familiar with it and this level of power, and he gets much stronger much more quickly, especially with Ichigo around to help him get back into the swing of things. Um, but yeah, and they've all been doing some training. Tatsuki and Orihime have been doing some training with each other. Chad has been meeting up with Jackie every now and again. They spar every now and again. He's getting more into a kick-based style. He's like throwing in his kicks, enhancing them with his balas, and maybe training with the remaining visors as well. He's really trying to push his limits on what he can do with hollow-based abilities. And Ichigo himself actually decides to learn more about his hollow-based abilities. So instead of where he would normally be training with the visors, he actually kind of trains. He still trains with them, and they've all relearned how to use their Zanpakutos and their Bankais with their hollow masks. They can't completely hollowfy the way Ichigo can, but they've gotten back into balance with their hollowified Zanpakuto spirits. So that's a yay! And in doing so, he actually decides to really explore his hollow based abilities. So he actually lets himself completely hollowfy in his training with the remaining visors. Maybe all the visors decide to come back and help him with this method of training. Um, and he lets himself completely hollowfy. And here he's actually going to be learning the abilities of an Arankar all on his own. So we're actually going to be keeping a little bit of his false Bankai because when he forms that Arankar Sanpakto that they all have, where like it's like their mask, like they break off their mask and they form it into a Zanpakuto or whatever, it's actually going to take the appearance of his full Bring Bankai. Or instead of his full Bring Bankai, it's going to look like if you remember when Ichigo did his Dangai training and he fought against Tensa Zangetsu and White Zangetsu, they ended up fusing. And the blade that he used was like a white blade with a white handle, similar to the color swapped version that white Zangetsu always uses, but it had a black guard and a black chain, and and the wrappings it's white wrappings with those black diamonds. So that's basically going to be what his blade is going to look like. It's going to have a clean white blade with a white handle, the black guard, and a black chain with like those black diamonds on the handle. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just search up Hollowified Tensa Zangetsu, and the blade that he's wielding, that's basically what Ichigo is gonna have. And he's gonna have like his one horn on his left side, similar to his horn of salvation, in his like Arankar state. And he's gonna learn about his resurrection. He's gonna be developing his own resurrection. He still has to practice to get used to these abilities, and I'm basically gonna make him super OP. It's gonna be awesome, and this is gonna be what he's gonna be practicing as the Cold War against or the Winter War, whatever, is going to start against the Arankars. Um, Instead of Shinji being the one who initially shows up, it's or maybe he still does, because for whatever reason they sent Toshiro into the living world. But they already have one captain level here in Ishin. They know that Ukitake is here, Yoruichi, so maybe they don't need to send in another captain, and they just send in the original ones from Soul Society. That it being Hitsugaya, Rangiku, Rukia, Renji, Ikaku, and Yumachika. They all show up after a few days. Uh, Yami and Ukiura end up invading, and okay. So first, Yami and Ukiura show up at Katakura Town, and here Ichigo faces them off with his false Shikai, his false Bankai. He's actually able to do a similar level of damage to Yami just with his false Shikai, and he's actually prepared to go Bankai against Ukiura. He senses him as the greater threat, but they end up retreating, and Orihime doesn't have her issues with her offensive power, and Tatsuki definitely isn't immediately taken down. They actually put up a decent fight, and Yami actually has a decent fight with all the Fullbringers before Ichigo quickly shows up and dismantles him. But yeah, they end up retreating. Ichigo meets up with the Soul Reaper squad, the Hitsugaya's advanced team, and Grimmjow and his Fraction end up attacking. Rukia has her battle against D-Roy, and Ikaku has his own battle against Edrad Leonis. I don't know. We'll just say that they go the same in canon, but Rukia herself has been training, so I don't know. If she lost that battle, maybe she wins it here. Renji, Toshiro, and Rangiku all have their battles against the rest of the Fraction, and it goes just about the same as in canon. They're able to deal with him. Ichigo has his battle with Grimmjow, and this is where things are starting to change. Ichigo has almost completely assimilated his Asauchi to him within himself, but he hasn't gotten around to being able to practice it because he's still exploring his Arrancar-based abilities. So it's something he's kind of been keeping as like something to use against Aizen and no one else. But he does face off against Grimmjow. They have their battle, and it's much more easy. He's able to land. He's able to handle himself decently well in Shikai, but when he goes Bankai, he's able to fight him very, very easily. They're able to match each other in power. Instead of Tosin having to force Grimmjow to retreat, Ichigo is able to land that Getsuga Tensho, and is able to send him not running away because he's ready to. Here he's ready to release his Resurrection much earlier instead of having to wait for that second confrontation they had in the living world. He's almost ready to release it here, but Tosin still has to step in. He brings him back, and he ends up losing his arm and his ring. Here, Ichigo decides to step up his Arrancar training instead of trying to perfect his holification, because he can freely holify. He can go into his Vastalord state, but he's working more on his Arrancar powers. He wants to kind of fight fire with fire, and he's developing his Arrancar state and developing his own Resurrection instead of holification, which is going to be much more powerful. Uh, Chad is the one who actually trains with Ichigo, or he trains in this general vicinity. He's actually training more with Renji. Um, but they train in the same area so that his Hollow Ryatsu can act up similar to how his Hollow powers developed when he was in Hueco Mundo. If he trains around Ichigo, especially when he's unleashing his Arrancar abilities, he is able to get more powerful. And I don't know if I'm gonna have him develop his full bring any further, but maybe he develops kind of a hollow mask. It's not a proper one, but like maybe he develops like a bit of a helm around his head that's split in half, similar to how his arms are. Or maybe since he's training with Jackie, he develops something to envelop his lower body. Now that he has something around his arms, he's focusing on his speed and his and diversifying what kind of offensive power he has. He's having a Deku elevation. He has legs. Um, I don't know if I'm gonna really have him develop anything named, but he's just getting stronger. He's becoming more skilled in battle. Um, Ishida, instead of waiting to regain his Quincy powers, he's already regained them. And let me go on ahead and see if he actually has Uryu Volstandik. Did he have one? Yes, he did. Oh no, I don't think he does. It doesn't look like it. Okay, let me properly search up what Volstandig does. Maybe he develops it on his own. Oh, it's literally just the okay, yeah. So he'd probably be able to develop his Volstandig instead of having to rely on it on gaining access to it from Yuha. Yeah, it is the answer to the drawbacks of the outdated let stilts. So yeah, maybe he decides to develop his Volstandig in answer to like all these Bankais and Resurrections. He decides to develop his Volstandig with his father, and he's able to. This so where he would normally be trying to regain his Quincy powers, he's instead going to be developing and trying to develop, experimenting to see if he can develop his Volstandig. That's gonna be what he's focused on right now. Um, Sorry, it's the page kind of had to reload for a second. But yeah, they're all getting their training down. Orihime doesn't really know what she can do in training. Neither does Toski, or at least they wouldn't have if they didn't get a bit of a recommendation. They themselves had been gifted Asuichi and have been training with Karin and Yuzu. Again, if you know where I got Tatsuki's and Orihime's recently developed abilities from, what fan fiction, they ended up becoming Soul Reapers in their own right. So they're going to be developing their own Zanpakuto. Not going to be ready anytime soon, but they are developing their abilities more, and they're doing it alongside Yuzu and Karin, who, if you don't remember what I said before, they developed their own Fullbring. Yuzu's is basically the ability to use Virgil summon swords, basically. Um, they're more like kitchen knives, but she ends up developing them like the summon blades that like Virgil and Dante can use. So like now that she's developed them more, she can actually have them follow her own attacks and can develop one that she can actually hold in her hand instead of just shooting them. Instead of them following her arrows, she can actually have them follow maybe a Reishi blade that she can develop, or her own Asuichi Hirzapunkto that she hasn't learned the Shikai to yet. Whereas Karin has learned how to. She's learning the Hakuda fighting style under Yoruichi, and specifically actually under Tatsuki. She's training with Tatsuki and Orihime, or Tatsuki and Yoruichi. Karin is training with Tatsuki and Orihime to develop martial arts in Hakuda, um, as well as her Fullbring, since similar to how Tatsuki with her Fullbring, if she keeps her momentum up, her flames burn hotter and she's able to do more damage. She has to keep up the constant momentum with her Reishi sphere and with her Fullbring attack. And for Orihime and Yuzu, they're training more in swordplay. I mentioned that Orihime developed her blade, so they're training more in swordplay against one another, maybe under Ishin. Um, the next day, Loopy, that guy who replaced Grimjow for whatever reason, Yami and Ukiora come back to the living world again. Ichigo and Grimjow have their rematch, and Ichigo decides to take him a bit more seriously. He summons his Hollow Mask, and he's way past the point where it's the half markings covering his face. He has since he's been training his Hollow powers, he has the two markings, the one that he had when he faced off against Aizen after he went Vastalord against Ukiura, and he is able to hand him his ass. Um, Orihime wasn't training with in Soul Society. She's been here in the living world, and because of the fact that Ichigo is able to hand Grimjow his ass, he's able to knock him away from the battle, and maybe he's confronted by Ishin, and Ichigo goes directly to confront Ukiura before he can try to get to Orihime. And so here we're not going to have Orihime getting kidnapped. That's not necessary whatsoever. Or at least it wouldn't be if it weren't for the fact that these are not the only Arankars that were sent in. I'm gonna go ahead and just have Holly Bell be the one sent in to retrieve the girls, and instead of just Orihime, she actually ends up taking all four of the girls in Tachi, Orihime, Yuzu, and Karin. They do throw up a bit of a fight against her fraction, but when Holly Bell herself steps in, she's able to knock them all out and kidnaps them. So instead, they're not going to have that 24 hours to say goodbye. They're just straight up kidnapped. And Holly Bell does not like it, but she does it so that her faction is kept safe. And they're going to be the ones who are going to be guarding Orihime and the girls right now. Ichigo ends up fighting against Ukiura, and Ukiura briefly considers himself going into his Primera Etapa Resurrección, but they end up getting the message from Holly Bell that the hostages have been taken. They've taken a few extra, but they've gotten their priority hostage and a few extra to add the incentive. And uh, Ichigo ends up being briefly taken down when not so much taken down, but he's pushed back when Ukiura actually does enter his Primera Etapa and pushes him back. He gets away from the battle, and they all end up retreating. But that Luby guy is taken out by Ichigo in a rage. I don't know if he was actually killed by Toshiro, but if he somewhat survived, yeah, no, he's taken out by Ichigo. And Ichigo is pissed. He wants to go immediately, but they know that they have to take some time to wait. So for the next 2 days, he completely focuses on training his Arrancar ability. He trains his Resurrection. And if you want to know what Arrancar Ichigo looks like, he has that partial he has a partial mask over his left eye. It's like over the left part of his face, and it's that striped mask he had before. And similar to Ukiura, I'm gonna have him have two releases. His first release date looks similar to his first holification, where he looks like a giant ass lizard, and he has that the half markings on the left side of his face. It's gonna be similar in nature to that. He like he grows a tail, he grows in muscle mass and height and all that kind of stuff. He gains those claws. He has those I don't know how to describe it. The two claws in the front, one claw in the back for his foot, and he ends up having the markings completely tattooed on the left side of his face. And that's the first stage of his release. And in this state he's able to he's a bit more wild. He definitely gives in more to his instinctive into his instincts. But he can't use his Quincy abilities because he's more leaning into his hollow powers than he is anything else. He's not properly balanced. So it's a state that he's not really going to need because he ends up developing his second state during these 2 days of training, and it's much more powerful and much more reliable. And he ends up in basically Horn of Salvation. He's gonna have the long hair. His I don't know if his top is gonna be off. Whatever. He's gonna have that black cloak. If you search up like Hollow Ichigo Brave Souls. Hold on. Vasto Lord Ichigo Brave Souls. Yeah, it should be up there. He has like the broken mask. He basically looks like he does, but he only has the right horn fragment, similar to how Hollow-Fied Tensuzangetsu looks. He's gonna look like that, but in his colors of instead of white, it's gonna be a black cloak with the red fur lining around his collar and his the ends of his sleeves. He's gonna have his partial fragment of his mask and his horn. And in this state, he's going to be able to use his Quincy abilities, but he's going to be focusing more on like basically using. I'm kind of undecided on how exactly I want him to look. Okay, he's gonna look like this, but with white. His cloak is gonna be white instead of black, so it's gonna be white and red instead of black and red. And he's gonna have the same horn fragment, and his blade is gonna be like I described it before when he first enters into his base Arankar state. It's gonna be a white blade, and it's gonna look like his full bring Bankai. It's gonna be a white blade, black hilt or black guard, white hilt, and black chain. And in this state, he is a complete monster. If you thought normal Vastalord Ichigo was overpowered, as he is now, he has surpassed his Bankai state. In him going into his base Arankar state, he is basically as powerful as he is in his false Bankai. Him going Arankar is as powerful as he is in his false Bankai. It doesn't really change much other than his look and the fact that he has a mask fragment. And he's a little bit more, his hollow powers are a little bit more boosted, and his Quincy powers are just a little shafted. Not by much, but a little shafted. Um, but when he goes into his Segunda Etapa, he completely clears the power of his. It's superior to his holification. So let's say his normal holification would give him like a 10 times increase. Um, or let's say like that lizard state holification would normally give him a 5 times increase, and in canon his Vassal Lord would give him like a proper 10 times increase. Here, I would say, or it's probably more because I don't know how to describe. It's more of a potent increase than just going straight to holification. It's more in touch with himself. So it's a much more potent power up instead of going to holification. So basically, he goes from his normal Shinigami self in his constantly released Shikai. He can go to Bankai, which is 10 times more powerful. He can go to an Arankar state, which isn't as powerful as summoning the mask, but when he releases his, it gives him the ability to release his Primera and Segunda Etapa, which is more powerful than either of his holification states. So yeah, we have a very OP Ichigo who is feral and looking to bring back all of his best friends. And his best friend in Tatsuki, his love interest in Orihime, and his two little sisters. He is prepared to go feral against all of the Arankar. Um, and then they have their, what was it? They left on October 31st. Okay. Ishida is retrieved and he's informed of the situation. He's been training in solitude, and he thinks he might have developed his Volstandig, but he's not sure if it'll cost him his powers, like the lead stilts. But he knows that he can use it. He knows that he has it in him if he needs it. And Chad himself has also been preparing his abilities. Let me see if there's, and I want to see if there's like some fan art of Chad Hollow Bleach. Let me see. Let me see if there's some fan art that can give me some idea. That looks sick. What in the hell is that? Oh, that is cool. Search up Chad Hollow Bleach. Something along those lines. That looks so cool. Okay, his arms, like the armor that coats his arms, creeps more over his chest, forms like a rib cage, and it forms like a mouth, like on his left. Oh, that's so cool. He develops this mask that's split in half, black and pink on his right side, white and red on his left, and it has like these matching horns that curve downwards. We'll just say like it's a bit of an open mouth mask. It's like a snarling mouth. He's gonna have horns, and on his left side, it's gonna look more like a rib cage, just a basic rib cage, forming over his chest. While on the right, it's gonna be more of like basic armor covering the right side of his chest, and the pinkish red stripes are going to be forming like an open mouth on his right side. That's cool. I'm gonna have him develop that during his time in Fuego Mundo, because he's about to get much more impacted with Holoreishi. He was becoming more powerful. He was hitting. So we'll say that as he was training in with Ichigo and Chad, he was kind of beginning to hit like a point where his powers were on the verge of developing, but he wasn't sure what he had. He wasn't sure just what was going to develop. And like I said, he's developed his shield on his right arm. He's developed his La Muerte. Both of his arms have kind of hit their peak, and he's been diving into abilities like Hierro and Sonido and Pesquisa and Bala as well. So now he's going to truly learn what it means to embrace the hollow within when he steps into Hueco Mundo. This is going to be a good arc for Chad. Wharf effect? What does that even mean? Oh, that is going to do nothing to stop our boy. And Uryu may have access to Volstandig. He's kind of on the precipice of developing a power on his own, but he's going to be much more powerful. Um, Grimjow is healed, much like in canon. Um, and Ichigo, Chad, Uryu, and Ishin all leave to Heikomundo. He's been training and he's regained his Bankai. I don't think he ever showed it in canon. I'll come up with something, but he's reclaimed his Bankai and he is ready to. That looks sick. Oh, that's cool. But he has retained his Bankai and he is ready to storm hell to hell and back, specifically Fuego Mundo, in order to get his girls back. The group is ready. They're about to charge into Fuego Mundo, and I think I'll go on ahead and end that here. The Winter War is about to truly enter into its full swing. The invasion into Fuego Mundo, they're all prepared, and Ichigo has brought his Aosauchi with him. He's keeping it. He'll probably have Kisuke seal it into himself in a similar way that if you remember when he first formed his Sanbakuto, it kind of like dissipated into motes of light. He's gonna have it in his inner world, resting and waiting for him to properly pull it out when he needs to. Whenever he hasn't really been sleeping. He's been training in his inner world and meditating, so that he can properly use his true power. But he's been wanting to properly acquaint himself with his hollow abilities, and now that he's heard about some of Uryu's training, he kind of has some idea, but he definitely doesn't have the time for it. He may eventually, but he won't right now. And you know what? I'm gonna go for 2 hours. I'm gonna cover more of Hueco. Why not? There are people with longer what ifs out there. So let's get into the invasion of Hueco. I don't want to end here. Um, so it's November and they have entered into Hueco. Everyone feels the tremors as they end up breaking into Hueco. They break through the barrier, and Renji and Rukia have arrived, and they've both been training. Uh, Renji has been getting a better grasp of his Bankai, and Rukia has been she's been developing every ability that she can think of. Even trained with Toshiro, since he's the only other person with an ice element Sanpakuto. She's actually been training with him on and off, as well as Renji. So they feel a little confident to help everyone out. Aizen ends up having his little meeting, and he, as per canon, forbids them from going directly after them. They fight those. Sorry about that. They fight the, what are they? The Primaron, those former espadas, and they take them out pretty easily. They're all kind of split up, but it's not that hard for them to take care of their own fights. Rukia is able to take on Aaron Yero much easier. She doesn't have as much baggage. She wasn't repressing her memories here. She was able to get over it pretty quickly, and she's able to take care of him with ease. Because he was honestly a pathetic espada. Ichigo has his battle with Ukiura, and Ishin actually steps in to help him as well. Ichigo doesn't get immediately folded the way he did in canon. He doesn't get killed. The two of them are able to hold their own, and they almost pressure Ukiura into entering his first stage. But Grimjow ends up interfering. They battle for long enough that Grimjow ends up arriving and interfering, and takes on Ichigo while Ishin takes on Ukiura. Renji and Uryu have their battle against Xyla Pero, and they're able to hold their own much better. Definitely not easily as folded, specifically on Uryu's side. Um, but they, I don't know why I'm stuttering over my words. Grimmjow ended up bringing Orihime and Yuzu, specifically to use Yuzu as kind of bait to lure Ichigo into a battle, and Orihime to treat any wounds they may have had. Ukiyor is kind of like, "What the hell are you doing?" In his monotone voice, and he's like, "I'm gonna have the battle of my life with this guy. You can take care of that other Kurosaki guy." And Ukiyor is kind of just like, "Whatever," and he ends up just straight up leaving. He doesn't really care. He doesn't care enough right now. He leaves, and it ends up being a two v one, which he is more than happy to oblige with. But Ichigo is able to just straight up use Bankai, as does Ishin, which I'm just gonna say similar to how Tensa Zangetsu is pretty similar in that it all it really does is just increase his power. It's gonna be similar with Ishin, but he's gonna have black flames, similar to Mugetsu, to how it looks. So his blade burns, it just straight up turns black. It looks similar to Tensa Zangetsu, but it's still in his own unique design, and he wields black flames, which he's able to swing around. And basically, each of his swing is as powerful as a full powered Getsuga would be from his Shikai. And together, these two both in Bankai, father and son, with one of with the love interest and the little girl of the family in danger. Oh, they absolutely fold Grimjow. He gets eviscerated, and is very much left for dead. They both kind of want to kill him, but they don't want to make this whole kidnapping experience into the realm of hollows any worse for the girls, specifically for Yuzu. And Orihime helps heal up any injuries they may have, and she doesn't completely restore Grimjow, but she does lend some of her energy in a basic healing keto to keep him from dying. Noitura comes in, and they met Nelio. Ishin was a little apprehensive, but her being a little child at first, he was kind of cool with it. He was kind of cool with her being around. Neliel ends up stepping in to fight against Noitura herself, and when she's about to fail, Ichigo steps in and completely wipes him out with a full power Getsuga. He does not want to waste any more time, and when he notices the weird leakage, the weird crack on her mask, he enters his own Arankar state since he feels like he's just gonna need to stay in Bankai. There's no more strain by it, by the way. I mentioned before that his Arankar state is basically him in Bankai all the time, but with just more leaning towards his hollow base powers. Since he's more used to it, he's able to stay in it similarly to how the Espada are just able to stay in their normal state. So he's as powerful as he is in his Bankai, and he is ready to release his Resurrection if he needs to. And he ends up fixing Nell's mask by just flooding it with Reishi and then letting Orihime do the rest. He keeps it constantly fed with Reishi while she is able to heal the crack in the mask so that it's not constantly leaking out. That's my sister's cat. I'm gonna give him some food in a little bit. Sorry if that's annoying. But yeah. So Nell is actually kind of restored to full power, and she goes with Orihime. She decides to join Orihime and all of them. Ichigo initially asks her if she can just keep Orihime and Yuzu safe, but Orihime and Yuzu both protest, saying that they need to save Tatsuki and Yuzu. So they end up planning that they're going to go straight to the castle, and Neliel will guide Orihime and Yuzu to where Tatsuki and Karin are. They'll rescue them while Ichigo and Ishin take on whoever they need to. Sorry if I'm shaking, I'm just a little cold in my room right now. Actually, hold on. I'm gonna go ahead and pause this. Sorry if there's gonna be a weird pause. I'm gonna take care of just a few things in my room real quick. Okay, sorry that took me so long. Okay, so yeah, I should have just done this from the beginning. Jesus Christ. But yeah, Nell has been fully restored much early thanks to Ichigo just flooding her with Reishi while Orihime healed her, so that she was able to heal it properly this time around. And she's gonna be sticking with Yuzun Karn. When they get to the main castle or whatever, they're gonna be splitting up. Byakuya ends up Byakuya, Mayuri, and Kenpachi show up. Kenpachi is a bit bummed. He's not gonna have a fight now because Ichigo just completely folded him on his own. Um, but let's say he actually decides to step in to the battle against Sila Pero and does not let any of his abilities get to him. He just completely blitzes him in the hopes that maybe he'll give him a proper fight, but he ends up taking him out. And Byakuya has his battle with Zomari go the same as in canon. And Aizen ends up, he launches his invasion into False Karakura Town, or proper Karakura Town, whatever. And when Ichigo has his battle against Ukiura, he decides to match him with release for release. He could easily take on his Segunda Etapa, and he would only need his own Segunda Etapa to match Ukiura's Segunda. So here it's actually going to be a bit opposite from how it was in canon. So without needing to activate his hollow abilities, his Segunda Etapa, um, he is just able to fight against Ukiura's own Segunda Etapa, just as he is in his base Arrancar state, which is, like I said, basically just his Bankai, which is heightening his hollow abilities. Um, and Ukiura decides to go to his Segunda Etapa a little earlier into the fight. Uh, we'll just say that Ishin helped. Maybe Ishin helped Neliel find the girls. They were left on their own with those two random ass Lolly and Manap, whatever they were called, and Manali, whatever. Uh, they were able to take those two pretty easily. Um, and they're able to get all the girls together who are now all witnessing Ichigo's battle. And he decides to just end the battle by going into his own Segunda Etapa and takes down Ukiura's Segunda Etapa, and it's even more of a stomp than it was with Vasto Lord. In his Primera Etapa, he's basically as powerful as Canon Ichigo's Vasto Lord state was. When he goes Segunda Etapa, it's a complete stomp. It was unnecessary, Ichigo. You didn't need to be that violent. It says here Rukia has a battle against someone called Rudoban. Let me actually see what that is, because I need to be refreshed. Who the hell is that? Rukia versus Rudoban Chalute. Oh, this guy. Wow. Well, we can say that, I don't know. Earlier, Renji and Uryu were saved, and they were in better shape than they would have been in canon. Maybe they help her out. I don't know. However that battle ends goes just about the same. No injuries though. Orihime is there to heal everyone, and the battle against Ukiura ends up resolving itself much more quickly. He sadly doesn't exactly get the same amount of closure. He's just straight up killed by Ichigo. But Ichigo does give him some words, so maybe he gets some comfort. Maybe he gets some of his closure. Um, Ichigo and his family, basically his family and his friends, they all move together. Yami's rampage is going on. They end up having their fight against Yami, and Kenpachi is finally getting the fight he wanted out of coming here. So that's my cat, my sister's cat, and he's getting his battle out of Yami. He's releasing more and more of his power. He's getting more powerful. The both of them are, and Ichigo decides to just end it. He powers up a full. He's still in his Segunda Etapa, so he just releases a full power Gran Rey Getsuga, which is something that he's learned now. He unleashes a full power Grand Rey Getsuga directly at Yami and completely wipes him out. And if you say he doesn't, him and Kenpachi can easily take him out. And because of this, everyone here is able to move to the living world with Unohana. Instead of just Ichigo and Unohana, everyone is able to move through the Dankai to the human world. And Aizen's thing, he took out the cleaner, same as in canon. They're all able to get back to the living world. And here is Aizen. He has had his confrontation against the Gotei 13. And it's about the same, but they had the Visors are here from the beginning. So they're able to hold their own a bit better. Um, Yumachika having his battle against Charlotte, whatever. All the battles with between the lieutenants and everyone goes about the same. Ikaku definitely is bringing out his Bankai from the beginning. Let's say that through training, that Kenpachi was putting everyone through after his battle with Ichigo and all that, he forced Ikaku to bring out his Bankai earlier. So he has more practice with it, and he's definitely more powerful. But that's going to be the only real difference between all these battles. Soifang versus Gyo Vega maybe goes about the same. Uh, yeah, maybe goes about the same. Maybe she's been training a little bit more since ever since encountering ever since encountering Tatsuki, so she can prove herself the better student of Yoruichi-sama. But either way, it goes about the same. You have Rangiku and Momo versus Haribel's Fraction. Mm, Still about the same. I don't really see much changing with them. Battle of the Chimera Gote 13 versus Aion. Hmm. Yeah, all these battles are going very similar. Kitsugaya can probably hold his own better against Tier because he was training a little bit with Rukia, but not by too much. It didn't affect him too much, but I could say him holding his own. But since the visors are here from the beginning, um, everyone is actually able. All the battles go more in favor of the Gote 13 and the visors working together. You have Hachigen and Ushoda versus and Hachigen and Suifang versus Baragon. It's not easy, but we can see that going about the same. Basically, they move on to the second phase where the visors show up. They move on to that phase of the battle much quicker. Um, the main important thing is when we get into Aizen growing impatient and attacking Haribel himself. Maybe this ends up going about the same, but maybe she's able to get out of the way because she's been having some issues with Aizen. Maybe it doesn't, but either way, she gets taken out of the battle, and he invites everyone to fight him directly. And everyone's in a bit of a better shape. You have Mashido and Kensei versus Wonder Ice. Again, all of these battles are just getting taken care of much easier, much earlier. So they're jumping straight into battle against Aizen much more early. Um, it says here that Yamamoto sacrifices his left arm attempting to perform Ito Kaso against Aizen. Let me see what that is. I think that's like the technique he was trying to use to take him out. Ito Kaso. Yeah. It is a keto spell. Okay. Okay. Maybe he would have tried doing it similar to in canon, but as I said, um, Ukitake has not Ukitake. Kisuke. Kisuke has been in better contact with the Gote 13. They've been coordinating things ever since Aizen made his declaration of war. So I'd say he doesn't. He probably knows that Ichigo is coming back. He's probably been given updates about the fact that Ichigo has been doing some training to make himself stronger, and he saw Ichigo hold his own against Aizen before, and he knows that he was able to do that within like 2 weeks combined worth of training in his Soul Reaper abilities, and that was him using some kind of false form of his Shikai and Bankai. If he's been getting even stronger, relying on his Hollow abilities, he has some level of confidence in him. He's not really questioning the Ryoka as much as he doesn't have as much doubts in them. He has more faith in them, thanks to Ukitake and everyone. Basically, all of Soul Society has a lot more faith in him much earlier because of all the feats he's shown. And and when everyone gets back, and when everyone gets back through the Garganta or whatever it was, since Yami is taken care of immediately, it's not just Ishin, Urahara, and Yoruichi going against Aizen, and then Ichigo going for Gin. It is Ichigo, Urahara, Ishin, Yoruichi, Mayuri, Byakuya. So basically, the entire ass group that we've been having from the living world, meaning Ichigo, Chad, Orihime, Tatsuki, Uryu. The two girls, although they're going to be more non-combatants here, Ishin, Kisuke, Yoruichi, and the captains and everyone from Soul Society: Byakuya, Mayuri, Kenpachi, Rukia, and Renji. And I mentioned Uryu earlier, didn't I? Yeah, they're all here. And Gin is more confronted. Instead of by Ichigo, it's going to be Ishin, Urahara, Yoruichi, and Ichigo versus Aizen. As for Gin, he's going to be confronted by basically everyone else. Um, we'll say he's confronted by a combination of or maybe Kenpachi also joins in on the battle against Aizen, and Byakuya leads the charge against Gin with Rukia, Renji, and Chad Uryu and Tatsuki to back him up, with Orihime and the girls acting as the last line of defense. Orihime mainly acting. They'll be acting as support from the sidelines using Kido, their Quincy abilities, and their full brink. But eventually, Aizen, being the absolute chatter that he is, um, he fights somewhat evenly with Ichigo's pre-meta Atapa. But when Ichigo pulls out his Segunda Atapa and tries to go straight for the kill, um, Ichigo, sorry, what Aizen does is that he tricks everyone else. He reveals that he's been messing with everyone else in the battle except for Ichigo. He's been messing with Ishin, Kisuke, and Yoruichi, and he briefly has them view Ichigo and Aizen as each other. So they get into a brief clash where they briefly disappear from view just due to their immense speed. They're not completely outclassed, but they literally blitz out of view due to their battle. They're the main ones who are fighting, with the other three providing help. Kenpachi tries to step in as well, and he uses Kenpachi trying to step in to seemingly switch places with Ichigo, and as Kenpachi, who's just Kenpachi, ends up trying to take a swing at Ichigo, this distracts everyone else and Ichigo himself, because Kenpachi has been releasing more and more of his power, so he's much more dangerous than he would have been otherwise. So when he takes a swing, he has to pull up his Hierro and his Blood Vein, which is a bit weakened when he's using his hollow abilities like this. He ends up guarding himself, but that brief moment is all he needs to use Kokosugetsu on everyone else fighting Gin and get the two of them out of there to Soul Society. Gin ends up confronting Aizen, and they're both a little winded, so it's about the same thing basically happens because they're both a little winded. And Ichigo once again confronts Aizen properly in his Segunda Etapa. And they have a climactic battle. It's very dangerous. They're fully going against one another. We don't have any of them, Mayuri sending Kurukara Town back to or that's going to be later. Ichigo, instead of having to train in the Dangai, even if he does decide to train in the Dangai, instead of going for Mugetsu, what he does is that he actually trains to achieve essentially his own Volstandig. For those like, what was it? I don't remember how long he trained in there. 6 months? He had like 6 months or whatever. Basically, during his Dankai training, instead of reaching that point where his false Pakto melds with him, he explores as much of his abilities as he can. He explores his Bankai. He explores more. He properly masters his Arankar abilities. And then he properly masters his Quincy abilities in developing his own Volstandig. And when he finally reaches this point where he's mastered all of the sides of his abilities, he is gifted his two Zanbakuto spirits decide that he's ready to properly handle his abilities, and he achieves his true Shikai. They gift him with his completed Zanbakuto, which looks, if you know what Kazui, Ichigo's son, if you know what his Zanbakuto looks like when it's sealed, it's basically that. It's going to look exactly like his normal false Bankai from before he achieved full bring, which he has never seen. He's never seen a sword like this. He likens it to his false Bankai, but just a little more simplistic. Um, and when he faces Aizen, he is in this state. He expected him to come out in some kind of hybrid state, ready in that segunda etapa. But as it is, he can't sense his spiritual presence. He looks like he has a normal sealed Sanpakto, which kind of confuses him. But then his eyes go in realization, and they end up having their battle. And as he is right now, Ichigo has far surpassed Dangai Ichigo from canon. He's stronger. He's strong enough that he's able to do it completely with just his unsealed Zanpakuto. He's able to have that same battle, but he makes an obvious show of like using of not even needing his Hiero or Blood Vein to stop Aizen's blade. He just straight up catches it, and he's like mocking Aizen throughout the battle. But when they get to that final point where instead of calling out Mugetsu, he calls out tear the heavens asunder and pierce the moon itself, Sangetsu, and he reveals his dual-bladed Shikai. He has his two blades, and he completely annihilates Aizen. There's no need for him to even pull out a Horn of Salvation, which is basically him going into his final resurrection. He doesn't even need to pull out a Volstandig, which would basically be if you don't know, the Horn of Salvation is him unbalancing his Quincy and Hollow Reishi so that his hollow side takes over, so that he uses more of his hollow power. And like if he were to do the opposite, he'd probably be using a Volstandig. He doesn't need any of that. He's able to completely match Aizen just as he is in his basic Shikai, and he wins. He wins the battle similarly to in canon, using a Getsuga Jujisho instead of a Mugetsu. And he's able to deal the same amount of damage, and he's ready to finally put him down before Kisuke steps in with his sealing Giro. Seals Urahara away, and as this is happening, Mayori sends Karakura Town back to the human world. He was able to do it as they were having their battle, since the battle with Yami ended much earlier. And Aizen is sentenced for his crimes for 18,800 years in the Muken. And we'll say that Ginjo and Tsukishima have also been put in the Muken for their crimes. Maybe they were transferred over back when Kisuke explained the whole situation with the living world. Like while they were preparing, maybe they transferred him, or maybe this is when they do it. But either way, he no longer has to deal with having Ginjo and Tsukishima sealed somewhere in the living world. They're taken care of. And we reach the point where normally Ichigo would be losing his powers, and he would say goodbye to Rukia. That does not happen. He does say goodbye to Rukia. Rukia ends up going back to Soul Society, but Ichigo is now a proper Shinigami with his proper Zanpakuto. He's going to be doing some training over the course of these next 18 months until the Winter War, or until the 1,000-Year Blood War. He tells Uryu about his own progress, how he developed the Volstandig, and he thinks he can help Uryu do the same. And those two are going to be training in their Volstandig. Chad is going to be exploring a power that he feels he is now ready to fully unleash with the rest of the Vizards. And the girls themselves, as in Tatsuki Orihime and Yuzun Karin, are going to be properly trained for these next 18 months, up until the 1,000-Year Blood War. So, I think I'm not going to jump into the 1,000-Year Blood War. We're about done for this video. I covered all of the Winter War, the invasion on Hueco Mundo, and everything. So we're all done for now. I'll cover the 1,000-Year Blood War in the next video, and well, not the 1,000-Year Blood War. I'll cover what progress they've made with their abilities in the next video, and what their lives are going to be looking like, where they're going to be in relation to each other, what they've all done, and what they've been training to accomplish in preparation for whatever future threat that may end up facing, that they may end up having to face. But for now, this is going to be the end of a What If Ichigo Trained Early. We're done for today. I'll be covering the next part of What If Grandpa Gohan Never Died. I had actually recorded part 3 earlier, but I had recorded it earlier, and the file ended up getting corrupted. It didn't save properly, so that was cool. I really hope it doesn't happen with this one, but either way, that is the end of this video. If you liked it, like, comment, subscribe. Uh, Hit that bell with the notifications, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.